Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Philosopher tier list where we dissect philosophers for fun. Uh, for this week we have the world's biggest mommy lover, Sigmund Freud. So yeah, let's get right into it. Who was Sigmund Freud? So yeah, he was an Austrian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis, a clinical method for treating like psychopathology through dialogue between a patient and a psychoanalyst. So the main reason why Freud's Freud is because his theories and techniques have had a major influence on Western thought, but they've also been the subject of numerous controversies because obviously, uh, yeah. So why and how did he become famous? So in 1902, Freud became a university professor, and so yeah, he got the title of Professor Extraordinarius, and he had a lot of patients, and so yeah, he had dialogues with those patients, and his prestige continued to increase in the university, and so yeah, and yeah, he was working in Vienna University, so he continued his regular series of lectures, and then he got like small audiences every Saturday evening at the lecture hall of the university psychiatry clinic, and so yeah, and then slowly and steadily, Viennese physicians were invited to his apartment, and they started discussing uh, issues relating to psychology and neuropathology. And slowly and steadily, his audience kept increasing, and that's how. And then he released books on his theories, and that's how he became famous. Um, and slowly, like his group, the group that kept meeting every Wednesday, it became called the Wednesday Psychological Society, and it marked the beginnings of the worldwide psychoanalytic movement. So, what has Freud said? So these are the key facets of Freudian philosophy. So, firstly, he proposes a structural model of the mind. So, he says that the human mind can be divided into three parts: the ego, the superego, and the id, something like that. So, ego is the part of the mind that mediates between the demands of the id, which is our unconscious desires, and the demands of the external world. So superego is the part of the mind that represents our own sense of morality and our internalized ideals. So this is the structure that he proposed. Um, so then we move on to the theory of the Oedipus complex, which is why he is the world's best mommy lover. Uh, so Freud believed that during the phallic stages of development, which is between ages 3 or 6, children develop a sexual desire for their opposite sex parent and jealousy and rivalry with their same sex parent. So he fell in love and had sexual desires for his mom and hated his dad. So he argued that this desire is eventually replaced and replaced, like it's repressed and replaced by identification with the same sex parent, which helps to form the superego. So basically, breaking it down, you want to have sex with your mom, but uh, so you start hating your dad. But then as you grow up, you realize you can't hate your dad, so you kind of repress that and become like your dad because your dad attracted your mom, so you can become your dad to attract your mom. Yes. So, so that's the reason why he is so controversial, um, and many more. But this is one of them. The next, so next he came up with a theory of defense mechanisms. So he argued that the ego uses a variety of defense mechanisms to protect the individual from anxiety and emotional pain. So these mechanisms include repression, denial, projection, displacement. So repression is you kind of like tuck it away so you don't remember it. Denial is you deny that it exists. Projection is where you kind of, I think, I don't know the difference between projection and displacement actually, but I would say that both of them follow along the lines of like, uh, let's say you're pissed at yourself for for breaking a plate, for example, but you don't want to come to terms with the fact that you are pissed at yourself. So you blame the plate for being fragile enough to break, or you blame the manufacturer of the plate. So that's how you kind of project it, or you kind of displace it. And projection is when, what is projection? I don't know. But I think projection is when you kind of feel it, you don't place it on something else, but it comes out in other ways. I might have to do a little more research on that. So, yeah. And then he comes up with a theory of psychosexual development, where he proposed that human development occurs in a series of stages, each characterized by a different source of pleasure, a different focus of libido, sexual energy. So these stages include the oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital stages, which is also why the thumbnail of this video has sex in it, because he's also obsessed with sex as much as he is with his mom. And then he also has a theory on the role of the unconscious, which is where he argued that much of our mental life is unconscious and that many of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are motivated by unconscious desires, conflicts, and memories. So he believes that the unconscious mind plays a very significant role in shaping our personality and behavior. So this is his philosophy. What are his positives? Well, he discovered that the mere act of thinking is in itself gratifying. So a lot of therapists and psychoanalysts commonly observe that the fantasy is more mentally and physically stimulating than the real life. So is it any wonder that reality doesn't measure up to fantasy? Of course not. So Freud's observation that humans attempt to fantasize things into reality is fully accepted by neuroscientists as the basis for imagination today. So, and as much as we hate to admit it, reproduction is an important aspect of evolution, and it's even according to Darwin's theory, right? Like natural selection, we want our progeny to move forward and carry the next generation or whatever. So sex is a prime motivator and common denominator for all of us. So it is not a message many want to hear. So even the most prudent, puritanical appearing individuals struggle greatly against the sexual appetites and expression. So you just have to look, like even people who follow celibacy or who are set to follow celibacy, like the Vatican, right, and even other religions across the world, they tend to have the most sexual scandals. In fact, there is one quote that I have heard. I think it's attributed to Osho Rajneesh, in which he said that he has often heard a prostitute talk about God and a priest talk about sex, because that's what they don't get. So take it as you will. The term defense mechanism is also so much part of our basic understanding of human behavior, right? So that is, again, this construct is attributed to the Freuds, like him and his daughter. So according to Freud, again, defense mechanism are psychological strategies. Like they tend to manipulate, deny, or distort reality to protect feelings of anxiety. And so among the many types of defense mechanisms coined by Freud, repression, rationalization, projection, denial, all of these are perhaps the most well-known. So so again, denial is an outright refusal to admit or recognize that something has occurred. It can be personal. Again, denial is so much part of our life, right? We can deny something on a very personal level, I don't want to deny, I don't want to accept that my friendship with someone is toxic, so I just live in denial. Or it can also be on a wider scale. You can deny scientific, social, cultural phenomena just because you don't want to subscribe to it, or you just want to be a contrarian. And this might seem like a no-brainer for all of us now, but more than 100 years ago, this was an aha moment for Freud. So so he came up with a theory that the past impacts the present. And that is something that it's pretty obvious, right? But no, he came up with it. So an example of the past impacting the present is the concept of transference, which is another Freud construct, which is again widely used in today's psychological practices. Transference refers to like very strong feelings, hopes, fantasies of and fears that we have in relation to the important relationships of our childhood that carry forward like unconsciously and impact present day relationships. Like ask yourself, like how much of your trauma defines the way that you live your life or the way that you like do or avoid things, and the answer might genuinely surprise you. Again, that's Freud. So Freud again discovered that there are no accidents and no coincidences. Even random seeming feelings, ideas, impulses, wishes, etc., like have unconscious meaning. One of the most famous examples of this is a Freudian slip, that you accidentally do something, but it's not accidental because it's kind of where your unconscious mind comes into the conscious and you end up doing things or saying things that might be your deepest desires. Again, there's a little bit of controversy associated with Freudian slips, but yet like there is reasonable evidence that part of it is true. So there are many supporters of Freud, but he also received strong criticisms from other people. So a lot of people stated that Freud's theories are scientific fairy tales, and he projected his personality into the theories. So they criticized Freud for telling the patients his thoughts and projecting himself onto the theories that he developed. So his theories were panned for being like overgeneralized and providing excessive and absolute formulations. So William James is someone who described psychoanalysis is very dangerous and described Freud as a fixed man with like inflexible ideas. Another critic of Freud, Jasper, he called his theories reckless, with every explanation pointing back to sex. His explanation of every issue was simple and was always caused by sex. So as like, yeah, even so, so that's what people say. Like Freud is also very repetitive, and according to his critics, he tended to not be empathetic. So someone else stated that the Oedipus complex is as real as demons, evil, and spirits. All of these ideas were created by the psychoanalyst and not the patient. Along with that, like psychodynamic theory of Freud is again a long, tedious process. Like just the idea of sitting, talking again is very long. But I think one of the more relevant criticisms of his theories is there's a lack of empirical evidence, right? How can you link anything to sex? How do you reach that? I mean, yeah, we know how we reach that, but how do you prove that? You know, so take it as you will. That is also something. And as a person, he also recommended use of cocaine freely for a long while in his career. Just wanted to put it out there. People have criticized it for fair reason, but that does not impact his philosophy, I guess. Maybe I don't know how he came up with it. Maybe he took a line and wrote a line, but I don't know. So yeah, let's move on to his influence and ramifications, right? So perhaps Freud's most important contribution to the field of psychology was the development of talk theory. So everyone kind of uses that today, and it's the basis of therapy as we know today. So prior to the works of Freud, again, many people believed that behavior was inexplicable. So he developed the idea of unconscious being the hidden motivation behind what we do. So, for instance, his work on dream interpretation suggested there are real feelings and desires lie beneath the surface. So, again, that is a new angle of looking at things, which is again what people do believe happens. Then there's also childhood influence, right? He came up with that idea, and that is also something that forms the basis of therapy, right? Like, you talk about your childhood because, like, specifically traumatic experiences can manifest as mental health issues. And that which is why exploring that aspect is what people do. and and again, if you look at literature in general, the Freudian lens of looking at things through sexual motivation has provided a very unique take on things, right? So that is something a lot of people have attempted, and like, and it does kind of do well to explain the behavior. Like I remember Freud using a Freudian lens to kind of look at the uh, to kind of explain the behavior of Stanley from A Streetcar Named Desire, in which he ends up essaying his wife's sister Blanche Dubois. So again, looking at it from a Freudian lens makes like helps us explain a lot of the interactions and the behaviors that happen in that play. So that's just an personal example, but it exists. So he's also influenced psychologists like Carl Jung, Erik Erikson, Otto Rank, among others. So huge influence, um, mommy lover, Freud. So let's move on to the more important part, which is my agreeableness to Freudian philosophy. So for the division of the mind, right? Um, I would give it a 3 out of 5 because I know that the unconscious and the like conscious mind is a thing, but the idea of the superego, which is where all our ideals are like held, is something that we cannot empirically prove exists. And like I don't know whether, and we also don't know whether development of ideals in general is conscious or unconscious. Like there are theories that it is conscious, there are theories that it's unconscious, but like it's the whole nature versus nurture debate, right? So we don't know where it lies, where the idea of superego lies. So like is so yeah, until the debate is settled, we don't know for sure, which is why I give it a 3 out of 5. Uh, for the idea of the Oedipus complex, it's a 0.5 out of 5 because while sex does drive us, I think there's something really unsettling about wanting to bang your own parent. So yeah. For the idea of defense mechanisms, solid 4 out of 5 because it's very real relevant. We see them in a variety of forms, but all of them kind of follow the archetypes that Freud has set forth in his theories. So yeah. Uh, then the idea of like psychosexual development, I give it a 1 out of 5 because there is there is merit to the idea of having a development stage, right? But but equating sexual development to a baby is obviously unsettling, but also if you think about it, kind of defeats the biological purpose of sexual maturity. Like uh what is the point of what is the point of a baby thinking about sex but then reaching sexual maturity like 12 years later? So clearly, like sexual maturity is when you start developing feelings and you start developing the want to like reproduce, etc. So like kind of extrapolating it to something to the stage where it doesn't really exist yet is kind of, it goes completely against biology. So I don't know where to place it, which is why it's a 1 out of 5. Um, and again, for the idea uh, of the unconscious, right? I give it I give it a solid 4 out of 5 because the unconscious mind is a thing, right? Uh, it exists, but also we don't know the level of impact that it does have. So its thoughts, like we haven't accessed its thoughts yet. So I would love to see more research done in that field, and I would love to like see its impact, in yeah, I would love to see its impact, and I would love to see everything. Yeah. So totally all in all, like Freud gets a 12.5 out of 30, which is like around a 41.67% ish. Places him at a solid E tier. Uh, so Freud Freud is controversial for fair for fair reasons. Like I give yeah, I understand where his critics come from, but I also understand where his theories come from. And and I think a lot of psychologists, what they do right now, or like what has been done after Freud, is they kind of find a middle ground where everything is not related to sex. And that has really helped in the development of psychology as we know it today. Um, so, so yeah, he has a lot of influence. And let me know again what your thoughts are on Freud. Um, would love to discuss more about him and about his theories and how they kind of impact our thinking and how we perceive the world. Um, yeah, and if you like this, again, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify, leave a like, comment, um, and yeah, looking forward to seeing you in the next week episode. Bye. Okay, I'm back for a quick clarification. I looked online and it seems like displacement is shifting your blame or shifting the blame of something onto a less risky target. So if your boss kind of yells at you, um, or like you can't do your work because of your boss, right? You kind of shift the blame of that to a coworker because the ramifications uh, of the blame is not as severe if you blame a coworker. That if that makes sense. And projection is when you kind of place the feelings onto a different person, animal, object. So I would say displacement is a type of projection. And yeah, that's a clarification. See you in next week's episode.